It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. My guest today is CEO Russ Meinhardt. Russ joined Old World Spices in 1993 and has held many positions over that time, including leadership roles in the manufacturing, operations, accounting, and information technology departments, becoming Chief Executive Officer today. He has extensive experience in building and leading high-performance teams and has developed and cultivated a family-style corporate culture. Russ holds a Bachelor of Business Administration from the University of Missouri and an MBA from Rockhurst University. Russ Meinhardt, welcome into the corner office.
Thank you, Brant.
Great to have you here today. Well, we like to start, kind of talking about the early years, where you grew up, what was your family life like? Tell us a little bit about that at the beginning of your journey.
Yeah, sure. So I grew up on a farm in Missouri. The days started, early. There, 7 days. Yeah, seven. It was 7 days a week. The time was when it was difficult for farmers, and so my parents instilled a strong sense of ethics with me. Hard work. But eventually, they provide me an opportunity to discover what I eventually wanted to do.
Did you have those morning chores before going to school? And what time actually did you wake up most days?
About 5:30 in the morning.
Whoa.
And the chores had to get done before you went to school. Yeah. And I always reflect on even Christmas Day, you'd have to get up and you're like,
sure.
No presents got opened until the chores
the chickens
were
fed, the cows were milked. What types of chores did you have in the morning?
It was livestock. So we were feeding the animals, making sure they had water, and and then it was row crops. We did, seasons kind of, came and went. So the things changed that you had to get done for that.
Then kind of came in, had a hearty breakfast, and off to school?
Yeah.
Was there chores as well when you got home afterwards? Was that part of your daily discipline?
Yep, it definitely was. It was kind of finishing up the day and taking care of the livestock again, and then you were kind of back in the house for supper time.
Yeah. Tell me about your parents. Were they generational farmers? Had something been in the family for a number of years?
Yeah, my dad had taken over the farm from his father, and my mom worked on the farm. All my siblings worked on the farm as well, and so it was just one of the things that was expected.
How many brothers and sisters?
I've got brother and two sisters.
Brother and two sisters, and I suppose all of you are up at 5:30.
So there's probably a pretty big generational gap between all of my siblings, and so
is that right?
There was only about one. I don't know if my parents planned it this way, but there was always one of us on the farm at kind of an a working age, if you want to call it that.
Right. And your dad said took over the family farm. Was that several generations back? Had they been farmers for a number of years, and immigrants before that? What was the generational heritage?
Yeah, immigrated from Europe, and then just
your
kind
parents
of
did, or was it grandparents?
Grandparents,
yeah.
Great grandparents immigrated.
Right.
Yeah, great grandparents. So then, my dad's dad, worked the farm as well, and then my dad kind of expanded it. We took over some additional land and did some cash crops as well.
And mom and dad, did they have a university degree? Were you the first to do so in your family?
I was the first to do so in my family. My brother went into the Navy. My sister got married, and then my other sister, she had gone off and done some like a technical school, but I was really the first one to have the big university degree.
So mom and dad had a pretty big influence in your life. Tell me about some of those early lessons, particularly with the daily chores and the responsibility of taking care of a farm.
It was just expected, and that's where I go back
this
to.
This is what you did, right?
Yes, exactly. It's like, there wasn't another option at that point. And so they instilled a lot of, it's just, this is what needs to be done. And so now, as I look back at that right now, it's like, there's just a sense for getting up every day, and it's just like, this is the stuff that's got to get done.
It's kind of accountability, isn't it? It sounds like you learned that at a very young age.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, those were responsibilities. Hey, if the chickens don't get fed, or the cows don't get milked, or the horses don't get washed down, no one else is going to do it. So you've got to step up.
Yeah, exactly.
Was school a struggle for you? Were you a good student? Kind of how did you fall on the spectrum there?
School came rather easy to me. I just had a sense for, I guess I could recall facts and figures and some of those things. But I really didn't learn how to study or, really how to learn information until I actually got to college.
Right. Was it a small school? Was this a small farm community, kind of a K through 12, type of schoolhouse that we have the image of, or was it a more of a metro area you grew up in? It was
a small town, kind of county school. So it was rather, big for that small town, but still a really rural area.
And then pretty much the same school location from K through 12, or did they have different middle and high schools there?
Yeah, elementary and high school. So they had a junior high and high school were combined at that time.
And what about outside of class? Was there time for sports, music, theater, anything else other than obviously your responsibilities and accountabilities on the farm?
Yeah, so small school, so opportunities for extracurricular were limited. A little bit of student government, a lot of sports, but then also in the community there was 4-H. And then Future Farmers of America. And then, I developed kind of early a passion for computers. It was kind of that time and age where computers were really new. And so I kind of got into a passion for computer programming.
Was this in the 80s or so? When did you kind of get started in that?
Early 80s to late 80s, yeah.
Did you actually own a computer, or was it something that you had to borrow or use at school?
I did. I actually saved up my money and bought my own computer, and that was one of the things I think that my parents instilled in me is like, if you want something, you have to figure out a way to get it yourself. And so, saved my money and bought the computer, taught myself, some programming, and, my parents always thought it was for games, but I was like, I was learning some additional skills as well.
What was that first computer?
It was a Commodore 64.
All right. That's going way back. I love it. Well, you obviously were doing some outside work as it related to, doing some savings. Or were you paid for your farm work, or were there other entrepreneurial types of things that you did when you were younger?
I guess you could call it paid.
They gave you room and board, right? And then the basics, 25 cents an hour after that or something, right?
Yeah. So, and this is a little bit interesting. My dad, when I was about 10 years old, my dad sat me down and he said, okay, I'm going to give you, it was we raised a lot of hogs. And so he said, this is going to be your hog. And so we're going to, as it, has additional livestock, we're going to, it's going to pay for your college.
Wow.
And it did. It really, it season after season, then I had one, and then it turned into, 6, and then it turned into 12. And so it became a good revenue stream for me to build up that money to go off and pay for my college.
Interesting. So basically breeding of the hogs and then selling them to market was how you earned your extra spending money.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah. And
that's
I wouldn't
cool.
call it spending money because my dad would never let me spend it.
It was set aside money, right?
Yes. Yeah. There was.
Well, how did you afford the Commodore? I mean, you had to have some, change lying around to get that.
So how I did that was I would go around and sell stuff to my neighbors.
Okay.
Catalogs, everything from wrapping paper to fruit. And so my neighbors just probably hated me because I'd show up and I'm like, you want to buy,
I'm sure they admired your entrepreneurial activities.
It was greeting cards. It was just anything that I could sell out of a magazine. So that was kind of how I built up the initial money. And then my dad he probably got calls from my neighbors and like, stop sending your son over here.
Give your kids a few bucks.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you started doing that door-to-door sales?
I was probably 8 to
Good for you.
12 years old, something like that.
Yeah, so that was kind of the equivalent of the paper route, which you probably didn't have a whole lot of need for, given the distances between everyone else. Yeah,
exactly.
Cool. Mistletoe at Christmas time, or greeting cards, etc. Cool. And did you do that, or continue to do that all the way through high school, or is that more of an elementary and a middle school activity?
Yeah, that was more elementary and middle school, and then the farm became very heavy from a workload standpoint, so I didn't have time and to do that. Plus, other activities in school of playing sports.
What kind of sports did you play?
Football and baseball.
Yeah, cool. And all the way through high school?
Yep.
And you must have traveled, obviously, to different locations. Did you, have an all-state team or kind of competed regionally? What was the competitiveness of your?
It was regional and district-wide. Didn't quite make it to state.
And anything else, any music or theater or anything else for, other types of pursuits, art, creativity?
Not for me.
Okay. All right. So going to college was a big decision. It doesn't sound like mom or dad did. And was there an expectation that you would take over the farm? And, was there pressure there, or was there an encouragement to, get that degree and find your own path?
Yeah, it was really, I remember a conversation with my dad when I was 13 years old about, my path and whether I would, whether he would want me to take over the farm.
Yeah.
And it was an absolute no. You need to find your own path. This farm, it was right for him, but he said it may not be right for you. So you need to find your own path. And so they really, didn't overtly say you need to go to college and kind of shoved it down my throat, but it was kind of implied.
Kind of gave you that choice, which is nice. Did you have any thoughts about taking over the farm? Was that something that had interested you at all? Or was that conversation kind of pivotal in making that decision to go on to college?
Yeah, that was definitely a pivotal conversation, but I saw my parents struggle so much in trying to provide, a decent living. And I was just like, this, isn't necessarily what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Right. What happened to that farm? Did one of your sisters take it over? Did they sell it?
We sold it. My dad came in ill health, and so he had kind of laid out his plan for selling it, and so we eventually sold that. So
you went to college. It looks like you went locally, from what I can tell. I'm not familiar with the university, but was it not too far away from home? What were kind of the selection criteria for where you needed to go or wanted to go?
It was about 3 to 4 hours away, and it was relatively easy decision for me. I applied, do all the ACT and the testing and everything. I applied very early. I had actually been accepted within a month of my senior year starting. And so I was kind of skating through my senior year knowing, hey, I'm going to, University of Missouri. And
so you were selected and it was a done deal.
Yeah.
Early decision, I guess, or whatever it's called, or what it was called then. Terrific.
Early acceptance, yeah.
Early acceptance. And how did you pick a major? How did you decide what you wanted to study?
So the computer programming, I was like, oh, I'm going to be computer science.
Right.
This is, going to be, what I'm going to do.
You
so
kept that up as a hobby through high school, I presume. And
yeah.
did the Commodore 64 get upgraded at some point in time?
Well, when I went to the university, I did, because then they were on mainframes.
Right,
So.
right. Exactly. Oh, gosh, I remember doing Fortran cards. That's how old I am with regards to when I first computer science class. Oh, my goodness.
Yep.
So continue that as a field of study then in undergrad?
No, what I found once I got to the university, all of a sudden there was this whole other world of opportunities out there. And what I felt was the computer science, even though I loved it, it was too constricting for me. My passions and what I wanted to do was much broader in range. So I transferred over to the business school, and I also found that, because the majors were finance, accounting, marketing, and management. And I was like, I don't feel like I want to be stuck in one of those disciplines. So they had what was called a general management degree. And so or a general business degree. And so I went and took it was a very small program. I actually had to get the dean's approval to be selected into it. And so that's the direction I went. I just went and got a general business degree. So I was taking all the accounting classes, finance, marketing, and management classes, but I wasn't, taking them so deep. So I didn't have a real deep knowledge, but I had a very broad knowledge of all the business acumens.
Russ, you mentioned about your passion and, what you wanted to go and what direction was. Tell us a little bit about that in those early days of college.
I didn't know. Once I got exposed to this larger world and all these opportunities out there, I was like, well, I don't necessarily know what I want to do now. I knew it was in business. I really liked that aspect of it. I had a professor who had some great real world experience, and so he would always share these stories, and I really liked that aspect of it. And it was about he came out of the furniture world, so he talked about how furniture gets made, how it gets shipped, how you sell these types of things. And so I really liked that aspect of it. So I knew that was kind of what drew me into kind of manufacturing and business, the business world.
Was it the stories that he told about his own experience, or was he more of a pure academic? What were some of those things? That
it was less academic,
right? Right,
and that's what really appealed to me.
Real world,
yeah,
awesome. So, any work during college? I'm sure you had to help subsidize costs and so forth, or was it returning to the farm on the weekends and breaks and so forth? What did you do from an outside job standpoint while you were in college, if anything?
Yeah, I worked as a bookkeeper for a couple of years. First couple of years, I was lucky. The first couple of years, I just worked off my savings, and then as the years started to gain on me, I had to take a part-time job.
Yeah, right. And then you did that. It was right at the university campus there, or somewhere nearby. Yeah, awesome. So, first job out of college, what was that?
I worked retail for a department store.
Yeah, good experience. Yeah. What were some of the lessons you got from that assignment?
A lot of bad lessons.
Sometimes those are the best kinds.
Yeah, I had a couple bad bosses that just didn't, they would expect you to know what you were supposed to do, and so they didn't really mentor you at all. And then when things weren't done exactly how you thought they wanted them done, they would get, irritated. And so it was just as I look back on it, I was like, that's not the type of mentor or boss or, the relationship that you'd want to have with people that are working for you.
What were some of those early leadership lessons, even from those bad bosses? Sometimes those are some of the ones that stick with you the longest, as I know from my own experience.
I think that every situation's a little different, and that you need to give direction, and then check back with that person. It's not micromanaging, but kind of check back with that person, make sure that they're progressing at the pace that you feel like they should be, and be a resource to them.
Be a support. Yeah, you didn't feel that. There was more kind of, go do this, not a lot of direction, and then chastising you when it didn't get done the way they thought it should be done.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I got the story that I remember. I got transferred to a new store because they had multiple department stores in the area, and so I got transferred to a new store. And so I show up the first day at the new store. Well, my boss is on vacation for 2 weeks, so I'm standing around for 2 weeks, introducing myself to people and going, hey, I'm the new guy, what can I help with? And so when eventually he came back, it was just like, oh, I didn't realize that I was had a new assistant or whatever it was, and I'm like, so just some of the life lessons that
sure.
You look back on now and like, I could have done that a lot better.
Do you remember the first time you started managing people, Russ?
Yes, and that was a learning experience in itself.
What job was that?
At the current job that I'm at, I kind of got thrown into hey, you're a manager now, and I'm like, okay, well that's a whole new life for me, and so what I had to do is I had to take from what I was shown on how to manage people, and again there was some bad lessons there. A little bit more. I had a little bit more authoritarian leader at that time, and so I followed their way of leading people, and didn't work out so well in some situations.
Now, did you start as a manager at WS, or did you come in as an individual contributor originally?
Kind of individual contributor. I was brought in to do, build processes. Again, it was around the computers. At that point, I was computerizing invoicing and inventory.
And so, again, some of those lessons in managing people, what were some of the takeaways, perhaps from some of the mistakes you made?
I think the biggest lesson was a little bit from, trying to find your, I always felt like I should be given respect. And what I eventually found out is like, well, you have to earn their respect, and you have to do that by, showing them the way, giving them some expectations of, what are our goals, and, trying to, set a path for them, and then letting them discover their way to that objective on their own.
So key.
But also being kind of there to, stand next to them if something goes wrong or they need some help.
Yeah, kind of that inverted pyramid, right? You're there to support them. How would you say your leadership style has evolved over time, Russ?
I think it has expanded immensely. I look at every situation differently and look at what type of leadership style do I need to utilize for this particular situation, whether it's the people that I'm trying to lead, or it's the situation that dictates the type of leadership that needs to be that would get us to the best outcome. And so it's kind of learning all those different styles of leadership and saying, well, here I need to be a little bit more directive. Here I just need to be a support role. Here I just need to, be maybe a better coach. And so it's just trying to, looking at the situation and going, okay, here's the best model of leadership for the situation.
Well, you've had an interesting career in that you've been, almost 25 years, I guess, at the same company, and coming in at an entry level, individual contributor role, and moving through a number of different departments. I was impressed by, all those various experiences. I'm sure that helped prepare you for the top slot and your job in the corner office. What was kind of the influence there? Were you raising your hand for those positions? Was there a mentor? Were you being groomed? Tell us a little bit about that journey through those various departments and various responsibilities. I'm assuming you kind of started in the IT area, right? Or maybe they called it the CS department back then. What was, kind of the original job? And then how did you kind of move through these various departments over that period of time?
So we didn't call them departments, we called them hats. And so we wore lots of different hats. And so when, as the business was growing, we saw, it wasn't intentional. There was just, hey, this needs to get accomplished. And I figured out, you call it raising your hand, or you dug in and you've got things done and you learned a lot
Well, let's double click
along
on
the
that.
way.
Were you asked, or did you volunteer, or were you volunteered? How did that kind of come up? Because it's unusual, to really have worked in so many different departments over a longer period of time. Were you proactive in those roles?
Yeah, I was very proactive. So we would see the challenge, or like, this needs to get accomplished. So we would just, figure out a way to get it done. We would, and tap into, whether it was a mentor or leader within the organization or outside of the organization, we would network with people people that had, a different sphere of influence or knowledge that maybe we didn't have. And so we would, tap into those types of resources as well.
But again, with regards to kind of your advancement, did you feel you were being groomed, or was it really more of a, you were the guy that stepped up and said, no, I'm happy to go help get this done?
Yeah, I'd say there was some grooming, kind of some early conversations of, hey, we feel like we can grow this. My background just from kind of just a problem solver in general. So I was always kind of the one leading the problem solving and kind of getting to a solution.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the people and culture. How do you decide if it's time to micromanage folks, or when it's time to stay out of their sandbox?
I always kind of start out staying out of their sandbox. I've one of the most recent things that I've learned is hire really great people and develop really good teamwork with the people that you hire, because they'll get you a lot farther than if it's just a team of one or just myself. So I really start with staying out of their sandbox, hire really good people and give them the objective and where you want to go, and then let them, direct you down that path. But then you just create some type of, I'm a big process guy, so I'm always got like, well, we're going to do check-ins on Friday, or we're going to do check-ins on Monday, or we're going to have a meeting to kind of bring the team together, and develop kind of a framework so that they know, okay, I've got to report back on where we stand with this project or with this customer, in this manner. So again, kind of setting that expectation, because before, early in the career, it was just like, well, it was a small team, so we always kind of knew what was going on. But as we've gotten bigger, you've got to set up some frameworks to be able to, for those report backs to come back to you.
Right. And if you saw people that really weren't hitting their objectives or their accountability, is that kind of when you'd come up alongside them?
Yeah. Or I'd find someone or another resource that could help them along. Yeah.
Right. Cool. You've seen, obviously, the company culture evolve over that period of time. Tell us a little bit about that. What are your thoughts on a company culture and building one?
Our company culture, it started out as a family company, so that really dictated the culture of the business. But as we've grown over the years, you got more people, you kind of start losing some of that family feel. And so you have to be very intentional about holding on to it. And you do that through being inclusive with everybody. And but we've also seen that there's a need for a little bit of corporate culture as well, in kind of setting up some processes, setting up some guidelines for people to follow, just like having paid time off or vacation time,
right? 401k match,
setting up some guidelines for people so they know where they can play and the things that are outside of those guidelines.
And how much growth has the company gone through? I mean, when you joined in '93, it was obviously family owned. Approximately how much were sales then, and how big is it now? I don't need exact numbers, but just trying to get a handle on the growth during that period of time.
We grew we were less than $1 million in sales, and now we're north of $20 million in sales.
Awesome. Yeah. So what would you say is kind of unusual or unique about your company culture today?
That we've held on to that family culture. We saw it in some of the early days of really the some explosive growth, you kind of get into some chaos, and so you got to set up some guide rails for people to hey, we're just not going to be everything to everybody. And that's probably some of the other things that we've found as we've tried to hire people. It was always, well, we'll hire people that are like us so that, we don't have to, kind of fit new people into
Yeah.
And we found that that's probably not, because then you've got the, just kind of yes people, and everybody's just kind of, head down, and there's no creativity. There's a more deeper vertical knowledge that you need within the organization to continue to grow.
Right. Cool. When you obviously done that period of time growing from less than $1 million to over 20 million today, there's been a lot of people that have been out of that organization. I'm sure now, and in your higher level assignments, you've been involved in a lot of the hiring and so forth. When you look for people to join OWS, and you want to make bets on them, what are you looking for? What are the kinds of things that you're looking for in people that you invest in?
We're looking for passion. Do they have the mindset that this is what they want to do? We're looking for intelligence. Do they have grit when something doesn't go right? Do they have the perseverance to really kind of push through and figure it out?
I love that.
And get through it.
Yeah. And I guess there's a little bit of proactiveness in that as well. Do you look for people who are willing to raise their hand and stand up and take on challenges?
Yeah. And we feel like we're responsible for that a little bit, trying to set a path for people within the organization and going, hey, here's where we're going to hire you, and we want you to be the best for that position, but we're also looking for you to kind of, take on some additional responsibilities, maybe additional areas of that will become more important as we solidify our current business and we continue to grow.
How do you interview and hire? I mean, I'm sure you're involved in direct report interviewing. There's probably other, key positions within the organization you might have an opportunity to meet with. But how do you kind of conduct yourself? What do you think is important in getting at what it takes to join your company and through the interview process?
Yeah. So the interviewing process, I've found that the best thing you can do is understand what you're hiring for. A simple job description, but really you need to fully understand the job requirements, the roles, and the responsibilities, and get that right. What we found is the worst hires that we've made, we didn't spend enough time on the front end going, this is what we need this person to do. And then I sit down and ask myself questions about the role. What's success look like? What obstacles will they encounter? And just kind of, what's that model candidate really look like? And then, once we start getting, we get that, and then you start bringing people in and start talking to people, it's, that we reinforce that we're hiring for culture fit first. And then, the technical fit is second. And then, we tap into some tools to help clarify some gray areas around people, because, sitting, looking at resumes and talking to people for an hour, it's difficult to understand, how do they behave? How do they think? And really what interests them.
Do you use any diagnostic tools, psychometric, psychographic tests, things like DISC, Myers-Briggs, or is that not something that you employ at OWS?
Yeah, that's one of the tools that we use. We use a tool that allows us to match the person's thinking style, behavior, and interest to the job, thinking style, behavior, and interest for the position.
Yeah, we use those quite often, usually when we get to the final candidate stage. But, sometimes those things are extremely important because you have, pretty good candidates that'll match up, and it's important to be able to have that fit. If you only have a few minutes to interview someone, let's say it's obviously not a direct report, where that's going to be a more critical hire, but maybe it's reporting into one of your direct reports and you just have a few minutes to work with them. What kind of things do you probe for if you just had a couple of questions to ask them?
Well, I always kind of ask what was your first job? Because that really tells me. And I usually have to dig because usually it's first job they had out of college or whatever.
Right.
So I try and dig back in, were you, the paper route? Yeah, exactly. So I really dig at that and trying to understand, what's their work ethic like.
Right.
And then I'm usually the one in the room that's asking the least amount of questions. I try and prime everybody to ask the questions, and then I'll try and dig and dig a deeper as to how and why to better understand who the person is and whether they fit the organization.
Well, Russ Meinhardt, you've been very, very generous with your time. We appreciate that. We're just coming up to the end here, but we do always like to ask one last question. And, what kind of career and life advice would you give to someone who has their eyes on the corner office, whether they're in middle management or maybe they're C-suite and close to it, or perhaps even if they're starting their career, looking back and, maybe forward with regards to folks that might, want to get into a role like yours someday. What kind of information, what kind of a career advice would you share with them?
The first thing I would say is do something you love, that you're passionate about and you have a strong interest in. And I've got a son that's just coming out of college right now, so I'm telling him these same things. I'm like, do something you love, work in teams, and develop social skills that allow you to get along with others. Because that's probably you can have disagreements about things, but you got to be able to come out the other end, come out of that conference room, and everybody would be on the same page. So you got to figure out those skills. Get involved, and not only involvement, but also be engaged. And then,
how do you define that? Wait, tell us a little bit about that. What do you see as different between involvement and engagement?
So you can be, part of a committee. You can be, be on a team, but be engaged in it. Not only just show up, but contribute to that group, and bring your skill set. Because you probably have a different skill set than the next person.
Anything else?
In this day and age, you have to be very persistent, and follow up. And even though you may not be hearing back from people, you just have to be persistent because there's a lot of things going on. Everybody is very busy, and so you almost have to, at some point, make an impassioned plea to people sometimes to, hey, I would like to, sit down and have a coffee with you and talk to you about, whatever the project that you want to talk to them about. And eventually, if you're persistent enough, you'll get that person's attention.
Russ, thank you so much. We really appreciate you sharing your journey into the corner office with us today.
Brand, appreciate you having me.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.